What is happening, everyone? Today we are looking at the 5 storylines that I am keeping an eye on as training camp starts winding down and the regular season starts approaching. So first, we'll start with what seems to be the forefront on everybody and every NFL fans eyeballs, I guess, is what is going on with the Micah Parsons situation. So far, he's been at practice, but not practicing and not talking to Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones thinks that he had a handshake deal with Micah Parsons, whatever that means. I don't really understand what that means. And that's the part where I think Jerry Jones has dropped the ball. Handshake deals is nice, but you need to get it on paper. And he, out of all people, definitely knows that as a successful businessman. I'm sure any business dealings that he gets into, he has it on paper as well. So it's kind of a weird situation. It's people are starting to think that it's personal between him and Michael Parsons. I still think a deal is going to get done. Remember that one year last year, I think it was right before the first game of the season. That morning, they got a contract extension done with Dak Prescott. So I think Jerry's just playing chicken, waiting it out, seeing what happens. I don't really know how it will end, but the way I definitely don't see it ending is by Micah being traded, because I think ultimately whatever offer Jerry Jones puts out in front of Micah Parsons, assuming it's a fairly competitive one, I kind of feel like Micah's going to have to sign it because the Cowboys could, if he, first of all, if he doesn't play, he's going to be losing upwards of $1 million per game. So at that point, Micah, that's going to hurt his pockets. And even if he plays out this season, next year, if he's a free agent, the Cowboys could franchise tag him, which would mean they pay him a good amount, but it's only a 1 year deal. And then they could do it again the next offseason. So technically, they have control over Micah Parsons for the next 3 years. So I think as long as the Cowboys put up a good offer in front of him, I don't see Micah not signing it. I don't want to say I hope he doesn't sign it, but in a way, if you're going to put out statements and say you don't want to be a Cowboy anymore, then stand on your word and don't sign it then and lose the money. And next offseason, when you're a free agent, then fine. Then, if you don't get the chance, keep turning it down. And ultimately, the Cowboys are going to have to trade you because they're not going to want to lose an asset as strong as Micah Parsons for nothing. But obviously, we still got about 3 weeks left of, camp, preseason, and all that before the regular season starts. I expect the deal to get done, but it's just something to keep an eye on, considering that there really hasn't been any talks, even after Micah's threat of saying, I don't want to be a Cowboy. But again, he's still showing up in Cowboy gear. Like, take the fines and don't show up then if you really mean it. So we'll see. I think it's just they're playing chicken with each other. And I think ultimately they'll both come to the table. Jerry and the Cowboys will offer a deal that's fairly competitive and around where it should be. Maybe not as high as Michael would want it, but I think at that point, if it's 2 million off per season, well, Micah's about to lose 2 million by sitting out 2 games, so it would just make sense for him to sign it. And that's the way it works. That's the way it works in life. The employee usually is underneath the employer. That's how it works. So when the employer offers you something at my job, there's, like the employer, essentially the employee needs the employer more than the employer needs the employee for most businesses. And that's just typically how it works. And especially in the NFL where, it's not like the NBA where, let's say, LeBron is, or used to be, let's say, literally it was LeBron is the Cleveland Cavaliers, or however you would look at that. But we'll see how that plays out. All right, the next storyline I want to watch, and this is the one I'm honestly personally most interested in, is the quarterback situation in Cleveland. Because Shedeur Sanders had a good performance in week 1 of the preseason. It was a good performance, but that's all it was. Like, we can react to it appropriately, saying like, man, the kid balled out. But we also can, not overreact to it by being like, he should be QB1 right now. He is QB4 on the depth chart. The crazy thing is the Browns are carrying 4 quarterbacks. Well, technically 5, but the fifth they just traded for, it was like Snoop Huntley or something, and he probably will get cut. But the 4 quarterbacks that really mean something in Cleveland are Joe Flacco, who's very likely the starter, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders. So this is what happens now. If I'm Shedeur just got injured, by the way. So he got injured. He's missing out on the practices this week. He's probably not playing in the preseason game. Next week, if that injury lingers a little bit and he doesn't get to play in the preseason or practice and he stays as QB4, he better hope that Dylan Gabriel shows out and plays great. And I know that Dylan Gabriel is above him in the depth chart, so people will be like, why would you hope for that? The reason you hope for that is because if Dylan Gabriel also stinks and sucks, and he is not good, let's say, and has a tough time in preseason, if you're the Browns, you have to keep Kenny Pickett now because Joe Flacco is your presumed starter. If he gets hurt, are you going to go to Dylan Gabriel, who, let's say, if he struggled in training camp, or Shedeur Sanders, who's a 5th-round pick, who's QB4 on your depth chart literally 2 weeks prior to the regular season starting? No, you would go to Kenny Pickett. That's where you have him. So if Dylan Gabriel struggles, I don't know what happens now in Cleveland, because also between Shedeur and Dylan Gabriel, even if Shedeur plays better than him or has a better camp, you are not cutting a 3rd-round pick. You're not cutting a 3rd-round quarterback. So Dylan Gabriel's as sure as can be going to be on that roster come week 1. So again, I just want to see how this plays out, because what are the Browns going to do? Are they going to keep 4 quarterbacks on the roster? Very unlikely. If they cut Shedeur, he's not going to make it to the practice squad. Someone's going to pick him up. When people get cut after training camp or during training camp, they go through waivers. So now every other team has a chance to pick up their contract. As a 5th-rounder with the talent Shedeur has, someone's going to snag him. So who are you cutting? I mean, it seems like the most likely candidate who you would be willing to part ways with based on the investment you have is Kenny Pickett, because you didn't invest a 3rd-round pick or a 5th-round pick in him. And even teams rarely, I feel like, or I shouldn't say rarely, but 5th-round picks tend to make the roster. It's not that surprising for 5th-rounders to make the roster. So cutting a 5th-rounder is kind of an indictment on your own drafting. Like, what did we waste this pick for? Especially a 5th-rounder that people thought was going to be a 1st-rounder in Shedeur. You're not going to cut him, are you? So does this mean Kenny Pickett gets cut? And if Kenny Pickett gets cut, now Joe Flacco is your only hope for wins, because if he gets hurt, you're basically saying, well, it's our QB4 from 2 weeks ago, or Dylan Gabriel, who, if he struggles in camp, you're going to put in a struggling quarterback and possibly even ruin his growth as a QB. So that's the second storyline that I'm keeping an eye on. The 3rd and the 4th are kind of similar but opposites. The 3rd storyline is Matthew Stafford. So Stafford's got a back injury. He hasn't practiced. He hasn't been there for camp. Back injuries are serious. So especially a team like the Rams that went toe-to-toe pretty much with the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, they are either like, with Stafford playing good ball, they're a Super Bowl contender. Without Stafford, they're Stetson Bennett and, not maybe even a playoff team. So this has major ramifications considering how does this play out with Stafford? Does he get back to practice? Does he keep sitting out? Is he going to be ready for week 1? What's going on there? And it's kind of, up in the air. Again, the reason there's a storyline to watch is because the effect it could have on this team. They could go from Super Bowl contender. I mean, last year, like I said, they were right there with the Eagles to make it to the Super Bowl, or a non-playoff team without Stafford. So that's huge. And the 4th storyline, which again I said is similar but opposite, is because now we're not talking about an old guy. We're talking about a young guy now with J.J. McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings. So obviously I'm biased as a Vikings fan. I try very hard to push away that bias, but I do think that this Viking team has a Super Bowl roster around J.J. McCarthy. Their defense was great last year. It only got better. They got Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. So the D-line is going to be better. O-line, they got Will Fries and Ryan Kelly as a center. So the O-line got better. D-line got better. Like, this team didn't lose major pieces, only got better, except we don't know what's there with the quarterback. And again, so Stafford was the old version of this, where it could have a drastic change on this team. And I think the same with the Vikings. He apparently balled out in the, practice with the Patriots. He's probably not playing in any more preseason games. I wouldn't play him if I'm the Vikings until week 1 against the Bears. But if McCarthy is solid, I mean, he doesn't even have to be great. If he just puts up decent numbers, a Bo Nix type year, let's say, so he plays good ball, I think they're Super Bowl contenders. And if he doesn't, I don't think they're making the playoffs, especially in the NFC North. So again, similar to the Rams, but opposites with these quarterbacks, because I think obviously the only thing to watch with McCarthy is how he develops throughout camp, the progression. All I'm hearing is that he has been progressing pretty nicely throughout camp. And he is a second-year guy, so he's not a rookie, but he hasn't really played NFL snaps. So we'll see how he adapts and how he goes on. But if he's getting prepared well in training camp and has a good start to the year and has a pretty good year, again, I think the Viking team is a Super Bowl contender if the quarterback is good to great. And so I just think JJ McCarthy needs to be good for them. And, what does that mean? 25 touchdowns, 12 picks? I'd take it. I think Viking fans sometimes get crazy thinking like he's the one and he's going to be the one right away and want 30 touchdowns. I don't even need 30 touchdowns. Don't turn the ball over because you got a great defense already. Manage the game, low penalties, and a, 2.5 to 1 ratio on touchdowns to interceptions, 2 to 1, 3 to 1 would be amazing. And you're good. I think this Viking team can make a run. All right, and last but not least, staying in the NFC North, the fifth storyline to watch here is Caleb and Ben Johnson. This is what happens here. I think the Bears made a mistake in just not starting fresh with Caleb and a brand new coach last year. It's in the past. It is what it is. They stuck with Matt Eberflus. First year didn't go well. All right, scratch that. This is year 2 now for Caleb. Expectations for Caleb are he played all of year 1. He should be better year 2. Here we go. I think it's tough on the kid to switch up the offense. Essentially, I think it's almost like a rookie year for him again. But that's not how people are going to look at him because you got Jaden Daniels, who is going into year 2 and led his team to a playoff win last year. Bo Nix got the team to the playoffs. So we'll see how McCarthy plays. Drake May looked pretty solid. So if Caleb struggles this year, I think in Chicago it's going to be tough for fans to just keep believing in Caleb. Year 1 didn't go great, so we'll blame the coach, but there were red flags with Caleb as well. But we put that on the coach. Now we get in this new coach who fans seem to love in Chicago. I have some questions. He's never been a head coach, so I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I'm just saying we don't know. I wouldn't have hired a first-time head coach in this situation for the Bears. That's why I've always said I think they should have hired Mike McCarthy, a proven coach that could at least get you to the playoffs, and then from there you can make the move and do the Mark Jackson for Steve Kerr type of switch to then take you to the next level and let Caleb actually develop with a coach that, has been around for a while, a head coach, I should say. So again, with Ben Johnson, fans seem to love him. He's got offensive linemen running routes and, D linemen covering like in practice for fun. I'm not a fan of that. If you get an injury on some stupid crap like that, then it just is so stupid. I don't get it. But that's his quirky ways. It might end up genius. He might be the best head coach in the league in a few years. But again, if this year goes bad for Caleb, are you blaming the head coach again? That's 2 head coaches? Probably not. So if Caleb and Ben Johnson don't get on the same page, I think Ben Johnson has more job security, you could say, than the number 1 pick, Caleb Williams. I think that's a huge storyline. And I think over the next few weeks, we'll see how that develops. He didn't play in the preseason week 1, and people were questioning that because they're saying he needs the reps. Some people were saying that maybe Ben Johnson was protecting him and himself from looking bad because maybe Caleb's not ready with the new and complicated offense that Ben Johnson is implementing. Maybe. But we'll see if he plays in week 2, week 3 of the preseason, how he continues developing. But if this team doesn't get off to a good start, there will be noise. And I think the noise will be on Caleb because Ben Johnson is a brand new coach. So we will see how that goes. And an honorable mention here. I'm just going to say this for, I had 5 storylines, but this one was one that I was thinking about possibly putting up here. But these 5 that I just said, I think are more, crucial and have more, long-term impact, you could say. But the other one is how quick and how hot is Mike McDaniel's hot seat in Miami? Because reports from there seem to be that they are getting clowned in camp. They are not looking good. They're not looking organized. And I just think if this team gets off to a bad start, I don't even know if Mike McDaniel makes it to week 8 or halfway through the season. So if you're going to place a bet for a first coach fired, Mike McDaniel might be the guy. And it sucks because he's a goofy guy that we enjoy his interviews. But, reports from Dolphins camp aren't great. So we will see how that plays out. But those are my 5 storylines to watch as training camp winds down and the regular season approaches.